How you doing, guys? And I've got back another interesting topic. And this has to be with the Apple using a newer A9 chip from two different vendors, one Samsung, the other one TSMC. And I call this Samsung versus TSMC hype. And hype it is, because I think it's way blown out of proportion, like it always seems to be. Not always, I guess. So let me get, for you guys that are not up to speed, yes, Apple does sometimes use multiple vendors for a lot of its products. In this case, it's an A9 chip in its mobile devices, iPads, iPhones, and so forth. Mostly, I think, the iPhone right now. So from Samsung, they use a 9.6 millimeter version versus the TSMC, which is a 104.5 millimeter type. And what they're saying is that the TSMC version, it's better on battery life or power consumption, a lot better than the comparative Samsung version. And also, supposedly, the Samsung version is slightly warmer than the TSMC version. Those are the two biggest things. And yes, blown out proportion. And then there was some benchmarks done, and it was supposedly found that the TSMC version was much better on battery life, yada yada, and so on, and so forth. And this kind of hyped out in many tech news sites and even YouTubers on Google's YouTube. And this even had a response from Apple, even taking into account of variable component differences vary within 2 to 3% of each other. And some people even taking that data and misinterpreting it, saying that the TSMC chips are 2 to 3% better. And that's not what it's saying at all. There are variances even within the same component by so many percents. And I am quite familiar with electronics. I do have an electronics background, and you even see certain components with tolerances, for example, resistors. Now, obviously, the minimal tolerance as possible is the best. Another thing, people making these claims also doing benchmarks, and benchmarks can often be very misleading because they don't really give you real world use. So only take benchmarks with a grain of salt. They can provide very useful data, but they are not end all necessarily all that accurate. You really have to do benchmarks very scientifically. Often a lot of people don't do this, especially YouTubers. So you got to be very careful how you do that. The best way to see the performance and or battery life is actually use it every day as you normally would. And I think a lot of times you'll have this psychological effect where they hear this news story throughout the internet, and it kind of like, well, it must be true because I see it everywhere. But often that has a psychological effect on the user, and then they use it and say, yeah, you're right. But in all actuality, more than likely it is not. And I'll give an example. You can even get a user. First thing is you get two different users. Let them both read the same tech news article, and then you give one a iPhone 6 S6 or 6S, and then tell them it is a Samsung chipped phone when it's actually TSMC, and then you do the opposite with the other user. Give somebody a TSMC chip, and then tell them it's a Samsung version. And the psychological effect often will kick in, and then they'll say, yeah, it's just like what the tech article said. In actuality, it's the opposite because they were given a different phone with a different chip set. So 2 to 3% variance, not really big difference that people would notice every day, I think. And it was kind of funny. Also talking a little bit not only on power consumption, but the heat of the Samsung chips are supposedly warmer. And it's kind of very funny how some of these tech news sites, I seen one YouTube video says it is a substantially hotter chip at only 3 degrees more. I mean, that's kind of very misleading how they hype it up. And often tech news sites and YouTube will do that. They'll take very many non-issues. They'll hype it up as much as possible to get hits, viral videos, and such. So you got to be very careful. You need to get your sources from more than one part of the web. You need to get as many as possible before you do this. And obviously, the biggest reason they do this is for money. So you need to be careful. And how do I know this is hyped up? Because I've seen it before. And I'm going to actually give you, in one type, it actually happened. Now, this has been a few years ago. Could be as far as 3 or 4 years ago. Apple, for its MacBook Air line, was using 2 different displays, LED displays. One was an LG, and the other one was a Samsung. Well, once that hit the news, then there is some people thinking, well, one must be better than the other. So then they started checking out to see what version they had, and if, they assumed that the Samsung version was better quality, and Samsung does build very high quality parts. And so they figure, well, the LG is inferior, so they had people checking the type of displays they had. They were returning it to Apple and in hopes of getting a Samsung version, and it's just perpetuating the hype. You don't need to believe in that. And so, please guys, don't believe in the hype.